Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios in Riyadh. These are our top stories. Saudi Arabia, Turkey and Pakistan are putting their new defence pact into action, with joint drills and deeper defence ties now in the works. The US ambassador to Israel calls settler attacks terror, while Washington pushes back against a permanent Israeli military presence in Lebanon. Japan's Prime Minister calls Putin's visit to a disputed island absolutely unacceptable. Saudi Arabia, Turkey and Pakistan are now moving to put their new defence pact into action. The agreement, signed last week in Mecca, includes bringing together senior ministers, holding joint military exercises and deepening defence industry cooperation. For more on this, I'm pleased to say I'm joined by Dr. Abdel Monem Said, former Egyptian Senate member. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show with me this evening, Doctor. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Doctor, in your opinion, how significant is it that Saudi Arabia, Turkey and Pakistan will conduct joint military exercises across land, sea and also the air forces?
You have an alliance of 3 states at this moment because there is, and I will say, the other party, the adversary, is having something called resistance and what have you, axes in the region. And it's making a kind of a havoc by using missiles and aggression. So that's a message in itself, that trying to balance the situation. And also here, the training itself it means we are serious. It's not only something, a forefront type of political alliance. It's also military, and it's training on what? Training who is the adversary in this exercise. So there is messages that to the parties that may concern of this issue.
And could joint development between these 3 countries and production of weapons, they have been talking about this, allow the 3 countries involved in this trilateral agreement to become less dependent, do you think, on Western defensive weapons?
Well, usually when you start an alliance, there is, as I said, there is signals of seriousness, but also part of the seriousness that weapons are very important. And these countries, particularly Turkey and Pakistan, they have a good industrial base, both of them. Turkey is ahead advanced. Pakistan, Saudi Arabia is emerging on that area as well. So here they can complement each other. The current war proved that even big powers can get out of reserves or out of interceptors. So there is things that you have to make it here and stay here to its moment of use.
And Turkey says Egypt could join the new defence pact. Do you think Cairo is seriously preparing to join this trilateral agreement?
Well, Egypt, I'm not there for about 2 weeks when the event happened, so I don't have any internal story regarding the Egyptian position. But I will say that Egypt always was trying to make a grouping in the region to really counter the grouping that's happening on the other side. And particularly, even we got a hit from a drone on Damietta, one of the major gas exporting and storage place. So that's very dangerous, very serious. But I assume that in Egypt, there is a lot of thinking. You get to, if you are getting into an alliance, to get an agreement from the House of Representatives. I mean, there is some constitutional and legal stuff to watch, and also to think and start the discussion with Saudi. Egypt's relationship with Saudi Arabia is great, with Pakistan and with Turkey, and with Saudi Arabia in particular is always annual kind of military exercises together. Morgan and Tabuk were called. So the relationship is already, both sides are ready for it. But having another arrangement that say when somebody is getting into a quarrel, we will get into it, that is the issue will be.
Because that's interesting, because a lot of people are saying that the Mecca Joint Defence Agreement almost echoes Article 5 in the NATO agreement. What do you make of that?
Well, it reflects that they are again serious, because, the region in general, there is always coalitions. There is always, a minimum kind of doing things. This time, when you make that kind of commitment, you can get out of it. I mean, it is something extremely serious. And now it's serious because the situation is very serious. Mm-hmm. The war is prolonged. The negotiations are not hitting any. Don't forget that Turkey and Pakistan in particular are highly involved in the negotiating process that's happening. They know and they can test what the Iranians are doing. And also there is a bit, I will say, with the USA. Sometimes there is good talking that the negotiations is already in the right direction, and sometimes we know we were going to hit them. So the situation actually, in my opinion, having President Trump in one side and you have the Iranian Revolutionary Guard on the other, both of them are really reluctant to make serious peace and reluctant to also to make a serious war.
And that brings me to a really important question, because President Donald Trump has said time and time again that the US has total control of the Strait of Hormuz. Well, Iran says that's not true. It's under our control. So we've been seeing this stalemate between the two countries for a long time. Who actually has the upper hand, do you think, here?
Well, of course, it is the United States. I mean, already the United States is having a siege of all Iranian ports. But I will assume that something could be under, an authority related to the rest of the people in the Gulf. We are not Iran or the United States that export to the world 20% of its energy needs. So here, that is the countries from Kuwait to the United Arab Emirates, from Kuwait to Fujairah and the United Arab Emirates. I believe that that's when, if we are in a pre-war situation, it will be authorized and better to have a kind of a council commission that take care of the maritime activities of the strait. Now we have kind of competition, both that violating the international law of the sea. I mean, the United States has something to hold this place, nor Iran, which was not ever, really on hold of the strait.
So right now, yes, we're just in a situation where we have to wait to see if diplomacy can actually come to the table. Do you think that will happen? Do you think the only option here to get out of the stalemate is diplomacy, or do you think the US could potentially strike Iran again?
I will say tilted towards the second one. The United States will strike because that's what they almost, designed for the current situation. That will be strikes and then negotiations. Strikes and trying to use force as a kind of trying to make prevailing of the point of view of either parties. Therefore, I will say, we have into a training kind now situation. Yet, I hope, of course, that they can, stop this war in any way. But I don't see anyone. The United States is, very powerful. They came in. We understand the impacts of American domestic politics and the coming election on the process. In the same time, Iran is like an inferno in which everybody is feeding it with fire, related to the new guy, Mujtabi, the new ruler, in the newly really stuffed up group to show their mantle in this kind of war. We are still, as my point of view, is still away from the point in which both sides are exhausted enough to get into a real deal.
And I just want to turn our focus to something else that's been happening today. Saudi Arabia's defense minister has been holding talks with Iraq's armed forces commander. That's been happening today. Saudi Arabia says there are intelligence reports, Doctor, of possible coordination between the Houthis, Iraqi militias, and Iran's IRGC. How serious do you think is this threat?
It is. I mean, we have, Saudi Arabia several times were hit from Iraq and from the mobilization force. And other ones, it's not the only one. There is a kind of a bunch of organizations that using aid from Iran, really they are, in a way, totally involved in the Iranian strategy of the war. So part of it was to hit Saudi Arabia before. And the last one, Saudi Arabia responded was the same kind. And for the others to know that, they will not keep silent. The same situation regarding Saudi Arabia is what's happening in Yemen now. Houthis are. I assume people in Egypt are also worried about what will happen because earlier in the war of Gaza, the Houthis attacked the ships in the Red Sea and almost closed the Suez Canal. So here, I think the situation is heating up more than we thought before a few weeks ago.
Dr. Abdel Monem Said, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time with me, and we hope to have you back on the show again soon. Thank you.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you.
To discuss some of the other latest headlines on the Iran war and all of today's stories, I'm now joined by Shane McGinley, news editor of Arabian Gulf Business Insight and editor-in-chief of the news movement, Rebecca Hutson. Rebecca and Shane, great to have you on the show with me. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Becca, let's actually start with you, and we're going to move to the latest warning from Iran to America about fabricated intelligence. So we've been hearing a lot about this today.
Well, it's the kind of the ongoing war of the words, isn't it? When we look at this conflict, so we obviously had this kind of escalating military, situation for many months, but we've also had that teamed with a kind of war on social media. We've had, Trump on Truth Social and Tehran using X. To sort of undermine the opposition and play to their sort of home audiences, and we've had Tehran today saying that the US is operating on sort of poor military intelligence, and we all know that America prides itself on being the world's smartest, greatest intelligence system out there. So it's a kind of real attack on something that's a great sense of pride to them. But also, the Iran suggesting that they've been operating on intelligence that's come from Israel as a way of undermining the peace process and the peace talks. So it's a really interesting kind of escalation of that war of words and the propaganda war that we've seen between the two regions.
And Shane, there's also been headlines this week about the USS Abraham Lincoln and sailors really struggling after 250 days on board the ship. What's the latest on this? Because we've also heard from Pete Hegseth.
Yeah, so Pete Hegseth, so the US Secretary, has come out and said that the reports that are claiming that the sailors and the Marines that are on board, like you said, for 250 days, that this is impacting their mental health because they haven't been able to pull into any port. And there's also been reports of conditions on the actual ship in terms of food and rations and sort of hot water. But I think, and as you would expect, the US and Washington come out and deny this. But there's a couple of points I think to be made. When I looked into the ship, this ship is about like sort of 37 years old, but it did get a refit about 5 years ago. And we're talking about like 5,000 sort of men and women serving on this ship. And I think if you take any company anywhere in the world with 5,000 or more staff, you're going to get a certain percentage of them who hate their jobs and are disgruntled. And I think, you know, this situation is no different. But I think the difference is that these days that you didn't have in previous warfare is that, you know, you got WhatsApp and you got social media, and those who are serving on these ships are sending messages back to their families, which are then, if they're not enjoying the experience, and the families are coming out and complaining about it. But part of me kind of thinks that, you know, this is what they're trained to do, and I think this is just sort of a natural occurrence that happens in warfare on any ship. But that said, I do think 250 days is actually a record. The previous record was during COVID, when there was a US ship that went for about like 206 days. So this is about a fifth longer. But there is some good news into it in that there is a replacement ship. I think reports haven't confirmed it, but it looks like it'll be the USS George Washington that will come to the region, and that will replace the Abraham Lincoln, which will then go back. And so I think that is the benefit for it. But I do kind of think that this story is possibly one that has been blown out of proportion by the Democratic side to make the unpopular Iran war seem even more popular to the MAGA base and the general electorate when we're coming up to midterm elections later this year.
Thank you so much for your thoughts on that, Shane and Becca. Stay right there as we move on to another story now. And the US ambassador to Israel is condemning Israeli settlers who have surrounded Palestinian homes in the West Bank, calling their actions terror. Meanwhile, US State Department officials have told Al Arabiya English that Washington does not support a permanent Israeli military presence in southern Lebanon. The comments come after Israel's defense minister said troops were here to stay. Becca, let's start with you, because obviously we heard from Israel Katz, and he's put this order in place, but the order that he's put in place in southern Lebanon is really at odds with the US brokered ceasefire we saw them achieve between Lebanon and Israel. So a really tricky maneuver at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this behavior by Israel completely contradicts and contravenes what was outlined in that framework, that there cannot be a permanent Israeli presence in Lebanon, that this is not to be tolerated. And in the background, we should be working for an Israeli exit from Lebanon, and obviously to demilitarize and de-arm Hezbollah. That is what this framework is set to achieve. And I think what's so interesting here is this real gap between what we're seeing now between Washington and Israel, between Trump and Netanyahu. It feels, it's kind of incredible that we've got members of this US administration being so publicly critical of Israel's behavior. That when we talk about the special relationship, there are very few historic alliances that are as deep and as kind of entwined as the US and Israel. But we have seen kind of very recently that is really shifting. Trump taking a meeting with Netanyahu, doing it in private. He used to kind of love the handshake photograph. We didn't see that a few weeks ago. He was far more keen to show off his meeting with Zelensky. And now seeing the US ambassador describing the actions of settlers as terror, which is a real shift in rhetoric. And we're seeing it reflected from the kind of MAGA base and upwards in the US, that they blame Israel for dragging the US into what they consider to be a kind of fruitless war in the Middle East, the forever war that we have going on in Gaza. And they are seeing kind of American military might sort of being poured into a territory that they consider to be kind of many, many miles away. And it's supposed to be a kind of isolationist and introspective, inward-looking kind of political movement. So I think this is a really interesting shift in the way that the two countries are operating. And as we were saying earlier, Israel relies on America for its military support, its diplomatic support, and this tension is incredibly bad news for Israel as it continues to act in such a sort of rogue, way, and against many of the frameworks that it had previously signed up to.
Yeah, absolutely. And Shane, I just want to bring that back to you, because what Becca said is what lots of people are echoing at the moment. We have a look at this relationship between the US and Israel, and we see the US not accepting the US brokered Gaza peace plan, the Lebanon one. We also hear from Mike Huckabee about the settlers in the West Bank. And there has been talk that there is a possibility the US could possibly sanction Netanyahu and the Israeli government to bring them back to the negotiation table and get them in line with these brokered agreements that are in place. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but once again, it will be a massive shift from the history between these two countries.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said and Becca said. Like, this is definitely unprecedented. But I think if any president is going to go rogue, so to speak, and break existing alliances, Donald Trump is the man to do it. And I wouldn't. It's still, anything is on the table when it comes to the Trump administration. But I think, the rhetoric is building up, and I think the other alternative is that Hezbollah and Israel are at a stalemate, in that Hezbollah is being called to disarm, but they said they won't do it until Israel withdraws from these areas, and Israel said it won't withdraw until Hezbollah disarms. So you're kind of definitely stuck at a specific stalemate, like most of the issues related to this particular war. So the only outcome I could see is that Hezbollah has always said that it won't disarm, because who is going to protect Lebanon if it does disarm? So I think that is the issue that needs to be resolved. And going back to your first story of defense alliances, maybe what is necessary is a NATO-style alliance for Lebanon to protect it, which would give Hezbollah that reassurance. Whether that will come from the US, Europe, or closer to home here in the Gulf is the big question. But I think that could be a possible solution, and then that would, like I said, would please Lebanon, which then might entice Israel to withdraw from the areas that are in dispute. But I think at the end of the day, I think a lot of it, in terms of Israel, it comes down to, they've got domestic politics to worry about as well. But I think they may have gone too far in this incident, and we've seen like the Huckabee comments. So I think you might see Israel sort of retreating in its rhetoric and its negotiations in the next few days.
Yeah, absolutely, because we know October is coming very fast, and that's when we're going to see these elections in Israel. And it's important that Bibi Netanyahu, just a quick thought from you, Becca, hasn't actually got the backing that he had once before. Many people are predicting he could possibly lose this.
No, not at all. I mean, since, the atrocities of October 7th, he has seen his popularity in Israel wane. We all remember, Hostage Square being full of, incredibly unhappy Israelis who did not agree with the actions of their government. And so, to Shane's point, he is shoring up the support of that very hardcore right wing in Israel to hopefully win that election. And we should also not forget, this is a guy who is being followed around by fraud charges that he somehow managed to kind of evade the court cases on. But this is a guy who's really struggling with a popularity contest in Israel at the moment. So this is really playing to that very small percentage of people who still agree with these hardline tactics.
And a popularity contest on the international stage, I think, too. But thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Let's move on to another story now. Russian President Vladimir Putin made his first ever visit to one of the disputed Kuril Islands, triggering a sharp response from Japan. Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi called the visit absolutely unacceptable as the decades-old territorial dispute between Tokyo and Moscow flares up once again. Take a listen.
We strongly protest President Putin's visit to the island. The Northern Territories are part of Japan's territory, both historically and under international law. It offends the sentiments of the Japanese people and is absolutely unacceptable. And for our response going forward, we will carefully consider the matter within the government.
So, Shane, Sanai Takaichi there, clearly not impressed. So how provocative is this move by Vladimir Putin?
Well, there's a lot involved in this, and I'll try and break it down very, very easily. But okay, so we've got sort of Japan and Russia, and as a bit of a history lesson. So there's about 4 different islands, and how Russia came to have ownership of them, which is obviously disputed by Japan, is that 81 years ago, when Japan surrendered in World War II, Russia moved very quickly and grabbed these islands, and they've had them ever since. And I think it was 2 days ago, Japan marked the 81 anniversary to it. And then to make things even more complicated, North Korea fired a missile into the sea between Japan and Korea. And then to add even more complication to it and more superpowers, just a couple of hours ago today, the Russian and the Chinese ambassadors to Japan both came out and issued a joint statement saying that they oppose any attempts to rewrite or revise the results and conditions laid out in World War II. So that's basically saying that these islands are owned by Russia. So I kind of think Putin has taken this opportunity to go to these islands and just kind of stir up the optics and possibly take some of the heat away from, or attention away from, what's happening in the Ukraine. So I think, Japan has every right to be annoyed, but I kind of think as well that it's not going to sort of ramp up to a level that people are talking about in terms of worrying optics in, say, like Taiwan and China. But I do kind of think it just kind of shows that, and I was discussing this with some of my colleagues, that what the Iran war has shown, that previously, the policeman of the world was the US, and that was always a deterrent that, if you step out of line, or if you go here, or if you go there, or invade, the US will step in. But especially now and under the Trump administration, that doesn't seem to, that theory doesn't hold up. So, countries around the world are going, well, we don't really need to worry about what the US will do anymore. We can kind of do what we like. And Putin, I think, is just flexing his muscles, which we've seen him do in the past. And last week in Poland, we discussed previously drones going into Scandinavia. So I would like to be optimistic and think that this is not going to escalate further. I don't think the Japanese want to get into any kind of aggravation with Russia. I think it's just the hard man, Vladimir Putin, just having a little bit of fun, to be honest.
And it's actually, while I've just been speaking to you, Shane, the ministry in Russia has brought out a statement that says Russia rejects Japan's unfounded criticism over Kuril Islands. So now we're getting a reply from Russia. But, Becca, this ties into something right now. We're talking about the US, well, Shane said, not being the policeman of the world anymore, which is what we always saw it as. And we look at Ukraine, and Zelensky is still requesting these Patriot stocks. They need these defense systems from the US amid concerns winter will really test Ukraine's defenses. But in all honesty, we're seeing their defenses being tested at a large scale almost every day.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, firstly, what an incredible job Zelensky does at trying to keep the kind of Ukraine conflict at the top of the news agenda, competing with so many global priorities. He is permanently reminding us about how susceptible and vulnerable Ukraine is to Russia's incredible war machine. And as you say, recently Russia have kind of, upped the ante when it comes to missile strikes, increasingly striking Ukrainian infrastructure. We're nearing winter, although it's very hot at the moment, it doesn't feel like it, which will disproportionately, impact and will be very tough in Ukraine. And so Zelensky is asking for 5% of the US's Patriot missile supply, which he says is what they need to be able to kind of, combat and defeat Russia over the winter. He says they need double that, 10%. If they want to defeat Russia's full drone supply. They have got he says they've got twice, that Russia have got twice the amount that Ukraine have when it comes to these drones when we compare it to 2025. So their supplies are greatly depleted. And at the same time, America, and to that point about them being the world police, are spread so thinly across these various conflicts that their own Patriot supply is the lowest it's ever been. They've got about 1,000 left. These things cost $1 million a go. And it just shows that, that sort of role they had of kind of, policing the world and stepping into these conflicts is sort of one they can no longer manage, and if Trump wants to, be dealing with sort of, the raging wars across the world, it leaves them greatly exposed. And Ukraine, at the moment being a real victim of that. But as ever, Zelensky doing a remarkable job of speaking to world leaders and reminding them that the support that Ukraine needs.
And keeping Ukraine in the headlines. Thank you so much, Shane and Becca, for your thoughts on that. Stay right there as we move on to another story now. The White House Press Secretary, Caroline Leavitt, is set to step down from her role at the end of this month. Trump said it's a decision he totally understands and respects, as she's going to spend more time with her young children and family. Trump has previously called Leavitt one of his most trusted allies. Becca, I must say, this news came through last night when I was on air, and I didn't really get my head around it, but you wake up this morning and this is just global headlines all over the world. It's not a surprise. What do you think? She just recently had a baby. It must be such a stressful job. And I know her nickname is Machine Gun Lips. That's what a lot of people call her, because she's a real tiger in that press room.
She is an absolutely incredible performer, isn't it? Kind of almost regardless of what she's defending, she is one of his most, if not the most, sort of loyal member of that administration. So I share your surprise that she's decided, to step down. And I kind of smell a rat here, because I think, she had her second child a while ago. She came back to work. And so I'm not entirely convinced about the line that she wants to sort of spend more time with them. I actually think that she might be sort of sadly kind of following the fate of lots of the other high-profile women who work around Trump, Pam Bondi, Tulsi Gabbard, to name just a few of these high-profile women who are devoted and so loyal and kind of fiercely protect him, and who, then the kind of the wind changes and his whims change, and they're shown the door, because he has this, as we know, a very well-documented, complicated, I think probably is a polite way of putting it, way of operating with women. Because I cannot see a reason why he wouldn't have wanted to keep her. She is fierce, she is young, she's energetic, and she defends him, during almost the indefensible. So I think this might be a case of the kind of Trump ex-female playbook, where he kind of struggles to work with young women. And I think for him, for his press operations, she's a huge loss.
And I would agree with a lot of the fact that she's a huge loss, because she's pretty phenomenal at her job. She's formidable and obviously young, 28, very successful. But it's interesting you talk about women, because 9 high-profile women to leave Donald Trump's cabinet, like you said, Marjorie Taylor, Kristi Noem, lots of other names. But Shane, there's also all the speculation that the news this week about Trump switching planes over an Iranian threat could be another reason why Leavitt decided to leave. What more do we know about this? Because that's been the big speculation online, especially.
Yeah, it has been speculated a lot. To be honest, I don't buy that theory at all, because if you look at it, like Marco Rubio and the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, they were also on the decoy plane, and this has been done before. Like when President Clinton was in office, they've used decoy planes before when there's a potential security threat towards the president. So I think this is just something that's been put out as another sort of scapegoat for people to say, oh, this is why she's left. Like, it could be just purely like you said, it's a very, very stressful job. She's got 2 young kids, and she's probably just like, why the hell am I putting up with all of this stress every single day? I would not be surprised if you see her launch like a YouTube channel, or she ends up on Fox News as a highly paid pundit, because frankly, I agree with everything you said. I think she's absolutely amazing. I'm going to miss her, because if you just watch any of the press office stuff, as a communicator, she is absolutely fantastic. Like I said, I don't agree with most of what she says, but the way she manages to twist, awkward questions back around, support the president, and then slap down, pesky journalists asking pesky questions. Like, she's just phenomenal, and she will be missed, and she will be difficult to replace. And I think I don't really think there was maybe an argument between her and Trump, because the way the White House is, I think that would have been leaked ages ago. I think genuinely she just wants a slightly less stressful life. But I would definitely think she is going to go into the media arena and be hugely successful with the MAGA base.
And I think that's such a fascinating thing that you've said, because she's still going to consult for the White House, apparently. But I have a theory, Rebecca, I don't know what you think of this. Ever since I've seen Caroline Levitt, one, I think she's an amazing communicator. She has got so much X factor about her, you know, charisma. She just oozes it. I've always thought she has presidential ambitions. And I wonder if Caroline Levitt is looking at this and thinking, oh, gosh, the Republicans might really lose ground in the midterm. I'm going to jump ship first, and then I'm going to create something else on the sidelines and then come back and possibly be the first female president of the US.
Well, certainly stranger things have happened. And I think you're right. She's got the star power. She's telegenic. And the base love her. And I think, you know, she's certainly a far more appealing option than J.D. Vance. So I kind of hope you're right. I think that would be kind of an incredible story, wouldn't it? And she's a very ambitious young woman. And she's got plenty of years ahead of her to do that. So I'd be quite excited to watch that happen, actually.
Yeah, no, I would too. But also, Shane, there's been a propaganda video that's gone absolutely viral online. Iran created this AI of President Donald Trump getting into a catering cart, you know, when he was smuggled out of the plane by Secret Service. Look at it. You can see it on the screen now. I don't know what your thoughts of this are, but Iran just seemed to be so far ahead when it comes to the propaganda online, Shane, because we also saw the Lego propaganda, didn't we? Yeah,
we've discussed this like numerous times, and I agree. You know, the general perception would be that, you know, Iran is backward and, you know, the internet's cut off and everything. But then at the same time, the US is the home of Hollywood and, you know, the entertainment capital of the world and all this kind of thing. But Iran is just completely winning the war on social media and propaganda and doing it very cheaply, low cost. And it's just really surprising. Like, I don't know why the US isn't able to combat better on this front. But, you know, fair use to Iran, it is really, you know, beating it on the social media front. And in a kind of comical way, you know, the fact that we're talking about it now just shows that their strategy is working.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I wonder if it's a job for the new press secretary. Maybe she'll have to get her media propaganda game up to speed there. But thank you for your thoughts on that. Now, it's that time of the show where Shane and Rebecca have chosen two of their quirkiest stories of the day. Shane, I absolutely love your story. You're focusing on books and a new feature that's actually on Instagram. We've just been talking about social media. I feel like it's always the land of social media now in 2026.
Yeah, to be honest, if I had prepared better, I should have a book to do it, to give you an example. So what this basically is it's called performative reading. It's where you take a picture of yourself reading some like hugely intellectual book, like, I don't know, James Joyce or some other like intellectual book, and put it online and then go, oh, look what I'm reading. And it's supposed to like make you look, you know, really intelligent and stuff like that. And some of the advocates that have been using a lot, you know, like as you've shown on the screen, Dua Lipa, the Irish actor Paul Mescal had posted pictures of himself reading, you know, really deep and meaningful stuff. And it has gotten a little bit of a sort of a backlash, people coming out saying, you know, this is sort of a little bit pretentious. But Instagram has taken this on board, and they've launched a function called Reading, where you can say, this is the book that I'm reading and all this kind of thing. But either way, even if it is just sort of fashionable, I think it's good, because if it encourages more young people to read, and we've seen the phenomenon of like TikTok book talk, I think it is. You can tell that I'm not down with the lingo, but you know, where books become really successful because people make videos on TikTok about them. And because I think the problem is that in the UK, for example, I found some statistics saying that only a third of young people between 8 and 18 enjoy reading, and it's the lowest level for 20 years. So even if this is performative and people are not really reading the books, they're just doing it to look smart on Instagram, I think if it encourages more people to read, that is a bonus. And hopefully when my book comes out in 2 years, more people will be reading as a result of this campaign.
plug for your book, Shane, coming out in 2 years. We'll take a picture of it, won't we, Becca, like we read. But Becca, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, because I must admit, I love reading and I'm a reader, but because our jobs are quite intense as journalists, the last thing I want to read is anything intelligent. All my books are pretty like fiction, chick flicks, you know, just easy reads. But it is a good tool, isn't it? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's obviously great to encourage people to read. I think there is an irony that this is a tool on Instagram where you are definitely not reading if you are posting and scrolling on Instagram. So I think there's something kind of quite circular about it. But I agree with you, whether it's performative or completely genuine, if we are encouraging people to pick up a book and potentially put down their phones, whether it's something lightweight or something as serious as Shane's book, I think that's to be encouraged.
Yeah, no, I really do. I agree. And, you know, in the old days on the tube, people used to sometimes leave their books on the tube and you would be able to pick up someone's book. I hope that comes back in at some point again. That was always a nice little thing when it comes to reading. But Becca, yours is also about some very, very small details about, I feel, the world's most secretive wedding ever. And it's about Travis Kelce's been talking a little bit.
Well, a little bit being the kind of operative phrase. So Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift got married, wedding of the year in July. They took over Madison Square Garden, shut down 3 blocks in New York. They had, you know, the NYPD on call. But we don't know anything really about what happened. We've never seen a single photo. We've had sort of a few little details from the guests, but very clearly they were sort of signing NDAs that were sort of ironclad. We don't know anything. And the most important detail, Leigh-Ann, we don't know what her dress looks like.
Yeah.
Which is deeply annoying. But we do, so Travis Kelce, her husband, spoke yesterday and he didn't give us much at all. He said it was a perfect day and the best day of his life, which I think probably he's sort of obliged to say anyway. But I'm just fascinated that sort of the world's most famous couple in the world's, you know, kind of busiest city and one of the world's most famous venues has been able to keep something of this scale such a secret. And it sort of reminds us all, doesn't it, that when celebrities want to go under the radar, they really can. And then when they want us to see them, maybe when they're performatively reading, they make sure we do. But I've got my fingers crossed for a documentary or an Instagram carousel, just because I'd love to see what was happening in Madison Square Gardens on July 3rd.
I know, I would love to see her dress. I'm so annoyed we still haven't seen her dress. I'm a massive Taylor Swift fan. I absolutely love her. I don't know if you're the same as me, Becca. Shane, I'm not sure if you're a Swiftie, but then there's also been some rumours coming out that apparently the guests had to arrive 6 hours before. They were in lockdown before, obviously, Kelce and Taylor Swift came out for the ceremony. I mean, Shane, weddings can be a little bit of a pain, can't they, if you have to wait around? I think 6 hours is a bit long, so it'll be interesting to see what rumours come out eventually.
I think what kind of gave me, not the ick is the wrong word, but sort of PTSD, is that there was 1,000 guests, I think, and they were all in sort of like different categories. Like the most closest family and friends were like in the inner circle, and then there was the outer circle when you had sort of people that she maybe went on their chat show or something. And like I remember like at ours was reasonably big. There was about 200 at it. So, and you don't get around to talk to everyone, but you feel obliged to. So if you've got 1,000 people, that just makes me really stressed about how you're going to manage the expectations of those guests and see everyone. But then if you're Taylor Swift, you just don't need to bother, maybe.
Yeah, you just pay someone to do that, I guess. I don't know, Shane. I couldn't comment. I've never been married or had to invite anyone to a wedding, so I've never dealt with that stress. But yeah, Becca, fascinating, isn't it, that they just locked it all down. We've had no word about it at all. And I think the rumour is there will be a Netflix series coming out.
Okay, excellent. Well, Leigh-Ann, you and I can make a date to watch that together then.
Yes.
That's all right.
Of course it is. I've been obsessed with Taylor Swift since the beginning. I love the fact she got married. Why not? We have to celebrate it. Anyway, thank you so much. Thanks to all the guests today that were on the show, and that's all from us on W News Extra. Once again, Shane McGinley, news editor of Arabian Gulf Business Insight and editor-in-chief of the News Movement. Rebecca Hutson, great to have you on. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, follow us on X, GMT. That's coming up next. Goodbye and thank you.